Happy Monday, Facebook world. I just had a call with one of my groups that I'm leading, and we had a really, I think, really good conversation about embracing kind of where we are in the journey, and moving beyond a place of comparison. Is what I've sort of named this live stream. And I wanted to share about kind of what we were talking about because I thought it was a kind of a good conversation. Hi, Ernie. And so I guess a little bit of the context of what I was, hi Roxanne, context of what I was, hi Talia, talking about today was kind of speaking to, hi Tara Joe, some of the difficult, challenging places that we find ourselves in sort of along the way that can be difficult for us to kind of share about. And I'm speak through it through my own kind of lens. This is, some of people kind of might know this aspect of my journey, some people might not. My first year at the ranch, and I've kind of alluded to this in other live streams, was one of the most difficult times of my life. And what was also very difficult about it was it came sort of off the heels of like one of the greatest years of my life where, my business really turned around. I bought my dream property and I had a very successful year of my business. And then on the heels of that, I had one of the hardest years of my life. And I think what was very difficult about that process was getting out of the place of comparing where I was to where I had been, and being okay with what it was, the current landscape of my life. And I think that one of the things so part of this group that I'm facilitating our coaching program is really holding space for other women entrepreneurs that are sort of on the journey and what happens when like really difficult things come up. And I think that one of the things that I learned is that it's a roller coaster ride sometimes. And sometimes there's aspects of when we're building that everything's going very well and it feels really good. And then there's times where it's very difficult. And one of the things that we were talking a little bit about was health. And I had this thing, where I sort of, when I bought the ranch, I had adrenal fatigue, I had burnout, huge amounts of stress. And it was very, very difficult for me to kind of embrace that or sort of be in the process where my health was really challenging. I wasn't having the same amount of success that I had the previous year. Well, I shouldn't say that. I had success, but I wasn't feeling the same way that I was. And so it was really hard as I was comparing where I was to where I had been. And it was hard for me to kind of try to understand and to not look back at, to be where I was. And I think especially when it's not, things are feeling really difficult. So one of the things that I was sharing about what it became a turning point for me when I had a very hard year with my stress and my health and, just kind of starting from scratch in my business. So there had to come to a place where I had to sort of embrace where I was currently without comparing it to where I have been before and where I want to be. And I think sometimes when we're in a place that feels really uncomfortable, and maybe it's coming off, like naturally there's different cycles and, we have really, high cycles and then it lows and then, or we feel like we're in that gap of where we want to be. Like we're still building something. So there's still places like even where I'm at, where it's like, there's things I still want to achieve in my life for us to really be present to what we have going on now. And I think that one of the things that can be alleviating from some of the stress that we carry is learning how to kind of embrace where we are currently and the current landscape that we find ourselves in. And I think what gets hard about that is that place of comparison. So I think the place of comparison that I'm speaking about here is not like comparing ourselves to other people. It's comparing ourselves to different parts of our life and where we were before, where we want to be, and using that sort of as a measurement of what's happening now. So when I had my really challenging year, I think what made it more difficult, number one, was I was trying to get back to where I was, and I was comparing it to the year that I had before, and I was very successful, and I was in a really great place, emotionally, mentally, and physically. And it was very frustrating for me not to be back to where I was back then. Because that where I wasn't comfortable for me. Or I would sort of look to the future and the things that I wanted to step into and be like, I wish I was over there. And so there was an aspect of like, I really didn't want to be where I was. And I think it's hard when things are feeling really hard for us to be where we in our current landscape. And so, but what made it more difficult for me in that year was that I was comparing all the time. And in the comparison, it actually was driving this place of judgment that where I am isn't okay. And there must be something wrong. And I'm making these like big mistakes. And it sort of drove this fear and this anxiety even more. And so I think one of the things that was a turning point for me through a very hard time was I actually got to the point where I had to kind of embrace that this is the current landscape that I'm navigating in right now in my life. And the reality of that is my health is really shitty. I don't really feel like I know what I'm doing. My business maybe isn't as successful as I wanted it to be. And to not, but to kind of be with it, that this is what I'm dancing with right now. I think there's one of, I have these cards. Sometimes I play with cards, and there's this horse card that I have that talks about the ability to dance with things in life that you get. You know, can you dance with joy? Can you dance with, you know, happiness? Can you dance with frustration? And I think it's hard for us to be with things that feel difficult and not ideal. And so we want to escape that. And we want to sort of get beyond where we are when it feels uncomfortable. And I think one of the things I've learned to find appreciation about is, can I be in appreciation and embracing of the places that I am, even if they don't feel like that's where I want to be. And I think that when we kind of, because holding ourselves in a place where I don't want to be here, or this really sucks, or I want to be back where I was, I want to be there, it takes us away from being present. And I think it actually makes it harder for us to move through what we're moving through that's really challenging. And I think the reality of it is there's going to be challenging experiences and times in life, you know, with anything that we're doing, you know, building anything, or I think relationships, or there's going to be moments where it challenges us a little bit. And one of the things I think has been a pivotal shift for me personally is the ability to be with the discomfort of something. And this is what it is. And sort of, it's not about resignation, and I don't think it's about quitting, but I think there's acceptance and there's embracing. And I think that one of the things I shared with one of the women today, because I could relate to her, because I've had my version of it, is sometimes we go through things and in the moment it feels really shitty. And there's things that I've been through, but I said where I can relate sometimes to some of my clients, or I have wisdom, is because I've been there and I've had this really hard experience, and it's kind of, it's seasoned me and it's given me wisdom. And I think when we're going through something, we don't appreciate it. But one of the things that I really try to look at when I'm on the journey of my life is, what is this part of the journey teaching me? And what is it forging in me? And I can be with the discomfort of that, knowing that also this is temporary. You know, it doesn't last forever. The challenging pieces of our life aren't going to be there forever. And I think that when I had these moments of feeling like I didn't have control over any aspect of my life, you know, with my health, and nothing I was doing was working. The other thing I was saying too with her, it's like sometimes we also have to have patience. I remember especially with my health, when I had, you know, going through my challenges with my health, I wanted to be better right away. Like I wanted to sort of have the solution and do these things, and the next day I'm going to be better and I'm not going to struggle with the things that I'm struggling with. And the reality was it kind of has taken me 2 years to get to a place where I feel back to normal. And that was also hard. So there's this impatience that we have and this pressure that we have of, I want to be out of where I am because it feels uncomfortable. And we don't really allow ourselves to have patience with the process, because that's hard for us to do. And I think what helped me is to find a place where it's like, this is where I am. And I know it's not ideal, and I know it's shitty, and I know there's things that I'm being asked to change, and I'll change that. And I have to appreciate that this part of the journey, even as uncomfortable as it is, there's a reason for it. And I want to be able to be with this in the same way that I would be with something that was ideal. And I think that's always sort of my own perspective of life is, can I dance with life the same way regardless of what's happening? And not to judge it so much. You know, I think it's hard too. We get very judgmental about ourselves. And you know, I was sharing with this woman this morning through her own challenges for me, and this is where the comparison piece in my own, success or future. Hi, Tony. It was like I was putting so much pressure, and I was judging myself too for I must be doing something wrong, or I must be failing, and I must be doing this, and not appreciating that part of the journey sometimes is to fail, and sometimes it's going to be hard. But there was so much judgment on that, and lack of forgiveness, and that gets really hard. And one of the things I shared today that I think I realized is that harboring that type of perspective on myself really wasn't helping anything. It was actually making me feel worse. And I think when we're going through something that's very challenging, the best thing that we can do to sort of help ease that or move through it, I think, a little bit quicker, is to stop resisting it so much, or trying to get over it quickly, or again, wishing we were somewhere else, and just to sort of be present to what's here, without judgment, as best as we can. And to know that it's temporary. I think every different chapter of our life and different journey that we're on is temporary. And, I know that through, and I'm talking in particular, like the first year I bought the ranch, and it was just a bit of a shit show for me personally, that I sort of reminded myself of this is temporary and I'll get through it. And what I appreciate about the challenge and this is sort of, I guess I can share some of my pieces of my own learning through, I had my health went, my business, I didn't hit my goals the same way, the element or vision of success that I had the previous year didn't really extend to the next year. There's sort of been a place where I had to start over, and that was very hard and very jarring for me. But the things that I learned through that is, when I bought the ranch, I didn't really have an appreciation of there's a whole new way of being that this is teaching me. And all of my challenges of that year with my health, it's like I wasn't operating in a way that actually was supportive for me. I didn't have great boundaries. I was really shitty with self-care. And when I had like a much bigger space to hold more horses and more responsibility, I'm not getting away with that anymore. And so there was a place where, hi guys, there was a place where I got to a point of the challenge of that year actually helped me become, I think, a more, and this is the other thing, that our alignment and our places of balance are changing all the time. So where I was operating before I moved to the ranch and had, what this dream represented and all of that space, I couldn't operate the same way. And I didn't know how to operate. And so the things that, with my health going, it actually taught me how to be better about my self-care. It taught me better about having different boundaries. I was operating in a place of disconnect from how I naturally want to create in my world. So not listening to my rhythms, not taking time to rest, operating from a place of hustle instead of listening to my intuition. Becoming a workhorse. That's not how I want to operate in my world. But sometimes we have to go through these things that are very contrasting for us to get back on track. So my adjustment, even though it was difficult, that forced me to adjust in places that maybe I wouldn't have adjusted if I wasn't forced to look at some of the things that weren't working for me. And naturally, I think anytime we're expanding or changing anything, there's going to be a level of discomfort. And so it was just like appreciating that discomfort was actually helping form me in a way of who I needed to become in order to support this dream. And so there was a point where I got to really appreciate that. And so now when I have things that happen in my life that feel difficult or challenging, I sort of look at, what is this teaching me? And what is this informing me? And maybe it's not coming as a lesson that I really love working through right now, but there's something here. And if I can sort of hold this as equally as I would, that's something that maybe brought me a lot of joy. I can really honor every aspect of the journey is equal, I think, in what it gives us if we allow it to be. And to not, again, sort of be in this place of, I think what's difficult is as humans is we compare where we are with where we were before, where we want to go. And so we are never really in the present of appreciating what we are now. So part of my own practice is to not, I remember in like my first year, I was trying to look back at what did I do last year that was really working and how do I apply it here? And there wasn't really an application because it was a totally new situation, and kind of living in the past or trying to figure that out and not being here made it more challenging, or then trying to look to the future of that. So it was more of like, I need to look at what I'm being given now that's informing me probably where I want to go. And this is the other thing I think too that's important too. We sometimes, I share this a lot with people, of some of my greatest successes have come from the shittiest of places, where I've been in debt, or I've been in terrible health, or I got trampled by one of my horses and broke a collarbone, and it actually kind of snapped me out of some of these things. I created a phenomenal program while I was laid up in bed with a broken collarbone. So a lot of, I think, our quote unquote greatness is created from really uncomfortable places. It's not often created from these ideal situations. So where I learned to embrace the current landscape that I'm in, what's uncomfortable, it's like, there's really great content here. There's really great information that's helping inform me, and it's forcing me to access different parts of myself that I wouldn't access if I wasn't uncomfortable. And I think if we can look at things that way, we're in sort of harmony with what we have. And I think it's sort of a bigger picture thing of, sometimes we don't need to get overwhelmed or take it so personally what's happening, and instead really appreciate what we're being given and be present and embrace it and look at, what is this teaching me? And then when we do that, we're going to get through it a lot quicker than if we resist it, or we try to not be present to it. Or we don't. And I think my fear in embracing or appreciating where I've been when it's been really hard is like, if I embrace this, that means I'm resigning myself to it. And I'm not trying to get myself out of it. I think we have that fear sometimes, or I did. But when we embrace things and accept things, I think it helps us let go of any resistance that we have to where the change is happening, so we can move through it quicker, and I think with greater ease, and it doesn't become such a heavy thing that we have to go through. So I think if this is resonating for people, I think this is a hard thing. It's like, how do we embrace where we are? And one of the things that I try to do is, what am I learning here? And to just embrace, this is what this looks like right now, and to not try to fit it into who I was or who I'm going to be. And it's like, what is this giving me in my learning right here in the present moment? It eases the pressure. I think it eases the stress. I think the other thing too, it's like comparison creates judgment on ourselves. When we're judging ourselves, we're contracting ourselves. And I think we're really belittling who we are. And I think that, it's when we beat ourselves up or we judge, it's not helping anything, so if we're moving through something that's challenging. And I think this greater appreciation, that wisdom and experience comes in all different forms. And sometimes it's really lovely, and sometimes it's really hard. And most of the, I think, the great things that are created through very challenging times, because, and one of the things that also helps me too is I have this line that says, contrast equals clarity. Oh, good. Glad this helped, Anne-Marie. Contrast equals clarity. So where I'm experiencing contrast in my life, it's helping me get really clear on where I want to go or what I want to change within myself, and it kind of gives me an awareness of where maybe I'm out of balance, or I'm not in alignment, or I'm not living in integrity, or I'm not really creating the things that are connected to where I want to go. And so that's where that informs that. So I think we don't have to freak out about that sometimes. So I think because we learn a lot, we can create a lot of really great things from really shitty places. And for the most part, I think that the crap is a very fertile ground for really wonderful things. It just doesn't always feel that way. So anyways, that's what we were talking about this morning. And I think in the context of, to kind of widen this a little bit, I think this program that I'm running right now is a 6-month program for other women entrepreneurs. And one of my desires for that was, we don't always get to talk about or see the behind the scenes of like how hard this stuff really is. And, whether we're building a dream or we have something we're putting towards, it's like, it's not sunshine and roses all the time. And like, how do we move through the journey when things are feeling very difficult? And, I know what it looks like to create something quote unquote successful and what that journey asks of you. And so, in this space that I'm holding with these women, as they're kind of building their own practices, is having some support of like, how do we move through the things that get us stuck? And a lot of the things that get us stuck is not, I think, the external pieces. It's how we're moving with the journey internally. And how do we process that, and how do we move through that so we don't become paralyzed or we stagnate and get stuck with where we are. And so, to be able to have a space, what I was saying to these girls, these women today, is that it's really hard. I think anytime we're building something that's so personal, our businesses or our dreams, it's very, very difficult. It's very challenging. There's a lot of the things that we have to go through, and there's a lot of things that we get challenged by. And I think sometimes what makes it hard is we're really judging ourselves for that. And so I have this wonderful woman who's in this program, and things have been feeling hard for her. And, I think where I said to her is, I understand that, and the judgment of ourselves and the comparison of ourselves from where we were, especially if we've had this thing like, where it's talking like we've come from a really great place, and then all of a sudden we're in this really crappy place. It's very hard for us to kind of move through that without, making up the story that we're failing or we're doing really terribly. It's just that it's part of the journey. And I can relate to that because I've had my version of it, where I've had a great successful year, and I bought this beautiful ranch, and then it was almost like I nosedive. And it was a very hard thing for me to wrap my brain around. And what was a big struggle for me, mentally, was that I couldn't get over that failure. And I was really hard on myself. And what shifted that for me was the stop judging and the stop beating myself up and getting frustrated from where I was in comparison, like where I was in the moment to where I was a year ago, and just be with what was here, and to try to be present with it and appreciate this is doing something for me. I may not get it right now, but it's doing something for me. And then just be present to what it is and not comparing it to a place that I was and judging myself for not being there. So I think that if we can have a different relationship with the things that we're moving through in ourselves, it really helps the process of being able to get through it and to create something from it that can be really wonderful. So that's sort of what I was kind of going on about. For anybody that's been watching this, how does it resonate? Any questions? Just kind of popped in. It was one of the things I'm sharing. Curiosities. Or not, just I'm curious about how it's landing for people. Any questions, comments? But it's the biggest, I think the biggest thing of where we continue on our journeys or create success is being able to move through. And how do we do that? How do we move through the challenging places? Makes sense. Yeah. Anyways, that was the kind of inspiring conversation of the day that I felt like I wanted to pop in and share. And it was a big change for me personally to be able to move from a place of really struggling with what was happening in my life to get to a place of, being able to move through that and actually be productive. Yeah. It's a big one. So it's always helpful, I think, sometimes to hear somebody else's perspective or when their struggles and where we can resonate with that, et cetera, et cetera. So I think my girls got some comfort from the share that I did today. So I thought I'd share it here too. Okay. On a side note, what do I have coming up this week? I have one last call of a series I've been doing this week called the Purpose Series, where I've been talking about, how we step into our purpose and how do we support the things that we're building. And this week, one of the things that I'm talking, so important for us all to share, we all understand. Yeah, totally. One of the things that I'm talking about this week in that series is a little bit about leadership, of how do we hold space for ourselves in the process of building our dreams or our purpose or our successes, and to kind of talk about like a little bit of an element of the vulnerabilities that we have to move through and how do we do that, because I think the biggest element of success is how we hold space for ourselves. So if this is interesting to you and you kind of want to hear more of my journey, you are definitely welcome to sign up for that series. It's completely free, and there's a recording if you can't make it live. I believe it is Wednesday at noon, I think. So for anyone that's curious about hearing a little bit more of that and getting some support that way, I will put the link in here. I think some of you guys. Okay, and that's it. Otherwise, that's it. So hopefully supportive for some people. And that's it. Happy Monday, everybody. Questions, comments for people on the replay, feel free to stick them in. Otherwise, hope you guys have a good week, and we'll see y'all later.